Hey everybody, welcome to A Cast to the Past, where best friends get together to talk about old games in a new light. I'm Josh.
And I'm Tom.
And today, we're going back in time to the year 2000. But before we go ahead and we talk about any video games, I gotta hit Tom with some hard-hitting trivia.
Yes, the last year of recorded history, the year 2000, where Y2K wiped everything out. I need to know some facts about this year, Josh.
When Chris Jericho appeared on Raw as Y2J, what happened after that? We don't know.
It just ended.
Yeah, that's it.
That wasn't a trivia question, was it?
No, it was not. No, it's not.
Oh, okay.
So, in the year 2000, what slogan finally ended on imported video games that came to North America?
What slogan?
Yes.
Was this a universal slogan, or is this kind of specific to a specific, one individual?
It was specific to North America for all games imported over.
Is that the year that the kids to adults and ESRB rating ended and was replaced with everyone?
Nope.
No. I truly don't know. What was it?
The slogan, "Winners don't use drugs." Yeah. That ended.
That was that Reagan era kind of drug advisory thing. I remember that on arcade games mostly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So on all of the arcade games, year 2000 was the last time that was actually seen.
Oh my gosh.
It's crazy.
If only other things from the Reagan era were wiped out in the year 2000.
What was the top grossing film of the year 2000?
I'm going to guess that it was Gladiator.
Ooh, so that was 4th or 5th on the list.
Ooh, all right. Let me see if I can get maybe the rest of the top 3. Oh, I believe number 1. I actually, now that I come to think of it, it was Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas with Jim Carrey.
It was Dr. Seuss How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
Okay, and for
followed
the other
by...
two, yeah, the other two. Oof. 2000, I struggle to remember a lot from that year. I'll just go on a swing.
The year after Episode 1 Star Wars came out.
Yeah. It was a little bit of a down year in the box office. I'm not going to waste too much time. What were 2 and 3?
Number 2, Mission Impossible 2. Number 3, Castaway.
Of course.
Number 9 was X-Men.
Wow, that's pretty low, but that franchise would rebound as we went on.
Trivia question number 3. This author gave their father a first edition signed of their book. 3 years later, their father sold the book for £27,000. Well,
because you said pounds, I'm going to assume it's J.K. Canceled Rowling.
Yes, it was.
Yes.
Her father. She gave her dad a first edition copy of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, and 3 years later, he sold it.
Well, he's lucky he sold it while that signature had any value, because if he tried to sell it this year, nobody would take it.
And now, the final question, Tom. What was the number 1 top-selling game of the year 2000?
Oh, I think it was today's subject, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2.
The correct answer was Pokemon Stadium, but we're here to talk about the number 2 top-selling game of 2000, which is Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2.
Well, that threw me for a loop, especially with all the research I did on this episode. I could have sworn this was the highest, but nope. I guess you can't stop the Pokemans.
You cannot stop. Actually, there was only a 200,000 copy difference between the two. That's
really competitive. Wow. Bravo. Yes. In the wake of the impending remake of 1 and 2, we're going to be seeing a duology current gen, I guess you could say, console remake for Tony Hawk. So Josh and I want to sit down and talk about maybe the biggest game of the series in terms of critical acclaim and pop culture notoriety.
Yeah.
And just reflect on our replay, talk about the very important history of this game, and also we did some extra credit, Josh. What else are we going to be talking about in this episode?
So we actually both watched the recently released Pretending I'm a Superman documentary on the Tony Hawk Pro Skater games.
Yeah, you're going to be getting a Tony Hawk packed episode starting now.
So what is your history with the Tony Hawk games, Tom?
This was something that kind of blew up in 5th grade for me. My experience first of it was on the N64, and I just remember a lot of friends had it. It came with a very big boom in skateboarding around the time. You know, you had Rocket Power becoming very popular in Nickelodeon. You had Tech Deck fingerboards, on sale at the Scholastic Book Fair, things like that. So yeah, it was just a rise of the pop culture presence of skateboarding, and this game kind of brought it to me. How about you, Josh?
So I remember one day going to Pizza Hut and getting a really awesome demo disc at Pizza Hut that had Final Fantasy VIII on it, but that wasn't the standout on that demo disc.
Nope.
Tony Hawk.
It was Crash
original.
Team Race. I mean, yes, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater.
The original Tony Hawk was on there, and it was just the warehouse demo, and that's all I needed.
But what else did you... Yeah, talk about significant, incredible demos. I mean, what... We could probably do a topics episode on demos that kind of blew the world up, but this would definitely be towards the top of the list.
Yeah.
And they made it available for free, It's like drugs. They gave you a hit and then they sucked you in.
2 minutes, go in there, have fun. And that's all you needed to sell that game. And man, did it work.
It did. Now, usually when Josh and I do our homework for a game, we dig through a lot of sources on the internet. But the cool thing with this episode is this documentary that we watched, which we will get into in full later, but I am gonna personally just drop some tidbits of the development history that the documentary talked about. When Tony Hawk was trying to, get a skateboarding video game made, his main interest was in a very accessible game. He didn't want something that was going to overwhelm the player and, disinterest them. He wanted something that was easy to pick up and play and easy to learn, but, difficult to master. And he shopped his interest around to a couple studios who kept giving him like complicated games, and it almost didn't happen. But the perfect marriage of Activision and Neversoft got Tony to the table and got these games made. And Josh, would you agree that these are very easy to pick up games, two in particular?
God. Yeah. So the first one, I can understand where it might be a little difficult at first for people to understand, especially with some of the levels that were very linear. But with 2, just going in and just skating around all you wanted, it gave you the create a skater option as well.
Oh, yeah.
So you can create your own person and go around and do these 2-minute drills or do free skate or skate with your friends.
Mm-hmm. Or, another change from the first game, the create a skate park feature,
Right.
The Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1, great bare bones arcade skateboarding experience. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, take everything that worked, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and then just make a better game based off of all that.
Yeah.
And this is probably one of the best sequels to a video game ever made, hands down.
It was one of those things that didn't need a sequel, and I'm so glad that it did. Like, it's one of those things like you looked at it and like, it doesn't need a sequel. This game was awesome the first time around. How can this get any better? And man, did it get better. Like, it got better several times too. Like, 2, probably the pinnacle of the entire franchise. 3, good. 4, all right. Underground, we talked about that, so go back to our previous episodes where you can hear our discussion on Eric Sparrow. But Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 is probably the height of just what these games can do and what they can give us.
Absolutely, yes. So the Tony Hawk Pro Skater first release, it had its moment. It had a big moment. It kind of blew up at a significant time in the history of skate culture. As I was mentioning earlier, the late 90s, beyond all the examples I mentioned, Tony Hawk also landed the incredibly complicated 900, rotating spin skateboard trick at the X Games 2 months before Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 released. So again, skateboarding, just one of the hottest things in mainstream culture at the moment. And then that game comes out, does gangbusters, acclaim and sales-wise. And now we got Tony Hawk 2 dropping on, let me do the drum roll of systems that this came out on. Are you ready? PlayStation 1, Nintendo 64, Microsoft Windows, Game Boy Color, Dreamcast, Game Boy Advance, Mac, I said Nintendo 64 ready, iOS, and eventually an Xbox branded remake called Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2X. So this was a game that everyone wanted to play. And even like a year later, when you have a next gen console and you're on the verge of the third one coming out anyway, they were like, no, get a 2 port ready right now. That's how in demand this one was.
The documentary goes into pretty in depth about the history of making it. And I'm so excited because like Neversoft they weren't a household name. They had like 2 or 3 games before the Tony Hawk series came out that they made. Yeah. And I remember playing Apocalypse with Bruce Willis. And it was all right. It was all right. It was a third person shooter for the PlayStation 1, but
and their previous games were just very kind of eclectic titles. You had a fantasy kind of Knights versus Skeletons side scroller, and then you had Big Guns, which they developed but didn't get finished. But yeah, they totally hit their stride, refining this skateboard formula down to something that's easily accessible. So let's just talk about that gameplay really quick, Josh, as specifically when it comes to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. So it's just drop-in gameplay, like we said. You start in these kind of like arena-ish worlds. They vary from, like a military warehouse to the campus of a high school to all the way up to outer space.
Yep.
You know what I mean? There's very interesting and unique levels. And, you're just kind of set loose with your character, whichever you pick. And the way it just basically controls is you start skating and you gain speed and momentum from consistently pulling off and landing tricks, which, makes you go faster, keeps, as I said, your momentum going. But if you wipe out, first you'll take some pretty gnarly, like injury animation, but you'll also be completely slowed down. You're kind of have to like start the slow process of kicking yourself forward and re-landing the tricks. And what can you do in these levels, Josh? What kind of activities do they offer for you?
So you can wall ride and knock bells off. You can ollie over hobos. You can skate down historic monuments. You could ride subway trains. You can grind on top of helicopters as they're getting ready to take off through a hangar. There's so much you can do in this game. You can even play as Spider-Man.
You can, yes. In the impressive roster of professional skaters, they also managed to include Spidey himself.
Yeah.
Which is funny because when I was replaying this, I noticed that like the title screen at the bottom, it says Marvel characters copyright of Marvel, to that. And I'm like, so they just gave that away on the front screen.
Yeah. Well,
I'm playing this the first time.
Yeah. Well, it's even funnier too. Like when you go and do the first competition, when you're skateboarding around, there's actual banners and logos for Activision's Spider-Man game in there.
Oh,
so it's like,
just buried it, yeah.
Like, all right.
Cross promotion.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned competition. Do you want to talk, Josh, about what, little narrative this game does have?
Yeah. So let's go in and dive into the story. You're a skateboarder and you just skate. You got 2 minutes to skate around all the maps that you got. You can go in, you can do free skate as well. And we hit on all of this stuff at the beginning of the episode, but pretty much skate. Cut and dry.
Yeah. All the characters, even though, they're all professional skateboarders, when you start the career mode, quote unquote, all their stats are kind of like at a base level. And doing all of the kind of challenges and goals in the levels that Josh and I were talking about allows you to increase their stats, buy them new boards, buy them new outfits, things like that. So by the end of the game, you can have a maxed out skater with just ridiculous abilities. And that's just all it is. It's just all in there for fun. It doesn't go for any type of like drama in the narrative or anything like that. It's just, have fun skateboarding and doing ludicrous tricks. It's very, very just have fun, man. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah. And I want to give a big shout out though, because there is such a wide variety of skaters in this game too. You got Bob Burnquist, you got Steve, you got Rune, Eric, Bucky Lasky, Rodney Mullins, who was always my favorite to play as of the pros.
Oh my gosh, I played as Rodney for this replay too.
He's so good. He's one of the nicest guys ever too. He's so just humble. Like he's just so just lovable.
And stat wise in the game, like his
one of the
speed
worst.
and Well,
When it comes to
okay.
Vert, when it comes to Vert.
When it comes to Vert, because he's not Vert, we'll get into this in the dark part, but like there is a difference between Vert skating, which is skateboarding on vertical ramps and the pulling off the aerials in the air, and then street skating, which I guess you could say this game is a marriage between the two, because you get dropped into urban environments where there's conveniently vert ramps placed, around schoolyards and things like that. But yes, Rodney Mullen, a pioneer of street skating, and just stat wise for him, I love that he had really good rail balance from the beginning, and I always liked grinding in this game. Yeah. So it's probably one of the games I like grinding in.
But one of the big things, and they talk about it, and we keep bouncing back and forth between the game and the documentary. There was this black kid who was a skater, and he was like, oh, I could go ahead and I can be a basketball player, I could be a football player, or something along these lines. And then he started playing Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, and he saw that Kareem Campbell was in the game, and he's like, well, wait, there's black skateboarders too? Well, shit, this is what I'm going to do for a living now. And like that was something that like just blew my mind. I was like, oh shit, like just the fact that it opened up the world to everybody. That's not just the skateboarding people, or not just the people who knew the music, which we are going to definitely get into the music of this game.
Absolutely.
But yes. It's just so crazy to see how this game affected so many people that aren't even in this mindset of what skateboarding is in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Absolutely, yeah. There was a young female skateboarder in the documentary who also said that she was really inspired by Alyssa Steamer being a playable character in this game. So, I mean, the roster is just kind of filled with famous white guys, but that that just was what the skating scene kind of was then. But there was enough diversity in there that you could tell it meant a lot to people, and I think that's really cool. That a game can not only be fun, but it can also inspire people to live out their dreams, no matter what their background is. So again, like, how many good things can we say about this game? And as you mentioned, we are kind of bouncing back and forth between the documentary and the game a lot. But A, I think the documentary is fresh in our minds. It's just why we're doing it. But B, it's like when something is like just purely good, sometimes I have a little bit of a time talking about it, because more or less I'm just like, just go experience it for yourself. Like, the positivity, just, you have to experience the positivity yourself. So I think the documentary is helping our conversation, like it's letting us flesh out.
The thing that's crazy though is this game made all of these people household names. Like you had the X Games and whatnot, and all these people showing up on skate videos or on TV or on ESPN or CBS or whatnot, or in commercials and stuff. And then not only that, but like, you had all of these bands that people may have heard of or never heard of before. And they're like, oh my God, this music is so awesome. This music fits. Talk about a game where the music fits so perfectly that when a song comes on, you're like, I don't want to change it, because this just fits so well. It's great 2-minute clip of a song that fits the feeling that you have when you jump into every single one of these levels. It doesn't matter what song it is. And I'm like, yeah, this is good. This is good. And everyone has their own favorite songs from the game. And it's like, all right, I'm going to destroy on this one now because my song's playing. Like, we all had that game or that song inside the game. And just listening to how this affected all of those bands too, saying like nobody's ever listened to my music before we put it in this game, and it's like, what? and I'm guilty of that, because there's a lot of bands in there that I was like, oh crap, I heard of Bad Religion before, but I didn't know any of their songs until they had you in here, and I was like, oh, that's a good song.
Absolutely, I 100% agree with you. So the soundtrack for the sequel, interestingly enough, it was based off of recommendations that Tony took from the pro skaters he invited to be involved with it. Like if he asked you to be on the character roster, he also was like, you got any good music that you could recommend? So all these songs are kind of curated by the pro skaters in this game. The first soundtrack, Josh, as you were mentioning, legendary for boosting the profiles of bands such as, Goldfinger. Their Superman song, it had whatever popularity it did have, it skyrocketed after the game. This soundtrack, so I'm just gonna, it's great, but this maybe will be the only slightly bad thing I say. It's that I think it is a slight step down from the first one, but it's kind of like how, you know, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, in my opinion, is a better soundtrack of songs than the second, but they're both great. It's like the difference between an A plus and an A minus. You know what I mean? That like, it's still a compliment. I think there's a lot of good stuff on here. I would say, personally, my favorite is probably Cyclone by Dub Pistols. That is one of my like adrenaline songs, like you were saying. I really like that one. May 16th by Lagwagon was another good one that I enjoyed. What about you, Josh? What were kind of like your top hits?
Guerrilla Radio by Rage Against the Machine. Blood Brothers by Papa Roach. When Worlds Collide by Powerman 5000. Like that was just all such good stuff. Bring the Noise by Anthrax and Public Enemy is an awesome song as well too. Like I think there's so much good stuff on here. And yes, the first one was a banger as well, as the kids would say, it slaps. This one does as hard. Well. like they are both equal in my eyes. Like they both have their ups and downs, but this one kind of hit me in that 2000. I was 12 years old when this came out. So this hit me. Actually, I was almost 12. I was 5 days away from being 12 years old. But like where I was musically, like this game fit perfectly. But
I just had one note I wanted to add. You by Bad Religion sounded like the theme song of a early 2000s WWE pay-per-view.
Yes,
like it just sounded like something they would have over all the video packages. So soundtrack, as you know, beloved as the game, for the upcoming remake, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1+2, they're bringing back so many of these tracks from both games.
Plus more.
They're including some new stuff too. Yeah. Plus more. Yeah. So I'm really excited that, it shows me a level of like care where they're really trying to preserve the experience. And, I'm just glad, would you say, let me ask you a question about the subject of remakes and remasters and re-releases and things like that. So this is going to come out a little bit after we share this episode.
Yep.
In doing our prep for this episode, you were fortunate enough to have a copy of this game already on the PlayStation 1, I believe.
Yeah.
And I kind of had to fish around through less than official means to play this on the PC because it's not available anywhere digitally. And I think we've had several conversations in the past on this show about, historical game preservation and how it just seems so difficult to play certain games in their original state. And it's cool that you have this game coming out as a full-blown remake with the original soundtrack and everything, but do you think that that's the best way to like preserve a game's legacy? It's like, if a game's old enough, well, we have to just remake it. We can't re-release the old version. Like, the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes, those are like, now kind of the new critically acclaimed standard. Do you think that should be what we do and just kind of like shove the old ones off to the side? What's your thoughts on all this?
No, I don't. And like, I understand it's showing respect to where it came from. But I mean, I love the original. The original still holds up to this day. 1, 2, 3, even 4. I wish there was a way that you can get some sort of a compilation or something along those lines. I even like when they had the PlayStation Classic, why didn't they throw? I think they didn't throw either one of these on there, if I'm not mistaken. Neither one of them ended up being on there.
Maybe because this remake was in development, they didn't want to take hype away. Like build up a Tony Hawk drought and then.
But at the same time, you have to pay for all the licensing and the songs too.
That is very true.
The hardest part of it, and we're finding that out with why they're not releasing the Scott Pilgrim game. There's so much licensing when it comes to this stuff that it's like, God, well, okay, we can re-release it, but now you have to pay everybody again. And will the people who are re-releasing it, are they going to feel like paying, 20 some bands to put their music in the game for 2 minutes? Like it's a catch-22 almost. It's like, yeah, we can preserve it and re-release it, but now we have to pay more money out to do this. And now is it going to be worth like the cost. Like, are enough people going to buy it to be able to counteract paying all these people?
So the logic is, if you also dress it up as a sexy remake, paying for that music royalties will kind of be worth it, because people will be attracted to the sexy remake more than, oh, like buying a digital re-release of the original.
Right.
Like, okay, I get your logic there. That does make sense.
It sucks. It sucks because, like I said, this is good. Even like we were talking about Resident Evil 2 and 3. Resident Evil 2 and 3, the originals, are awesome games. Resident Evil 2, one of my favorite games of all time. Like, it sucks that they're going to be almost forgotten because of a newer, better version coming out of it. But I mean, at least like a phoenix, from the ashes is births brand new. But,
exactly. Fitting. Hawk, Phoenix, Sparrow. Our boy Eric Sparrow.
So the last thing I want to talk about this game, okay?
Sure.
Just to give you an idea of how great this game is. Now, you've heard us say it's great. Tom had one small little hiccup about the game, and there are some things that could be better or could have been fixed and were fixed in later games. Getting off your board, being able to do wall plans, being able to have a little bit more control, or smoother graphics and stuff like that, right? That's fine. We all have, even this is also one of those games too in the 2000s where it did that weird thing where you could take a picture of your face and put it over your created character. Do you remember that was that was a big thing that was just terrible?
Always a nightmare.
It was. This was one of those games that did that too. But create a character, create a park, all that kind of stuff is included. As of recording this, is the second highest video game rated on Metacritic.
Indeed,
that's how good this game
is. A very impressive accolade.
That's how good this game is. That a extreme sports title is ranked just under Ocarina of Time.
And it's old enough that that all of its reviews are probably sincere and not written in bad faith or bribed. Any Metacritic scores collected from back in the day were probably a little bit more legit than today. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's so crazy though to think that a game from 20 years ago, is standing the test of time when we have games like Red Dead Redemption, like The Last of Us, like all the Uncharted, like Grand Theft Auto 5, like Portal, like Half-Life 2, all of these huge games. Even Chrono Trigger is not ranked up this high. Like, how crazy is that to think that Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 is the second best ranked game ever made?
Hey, it deserves it, in my opinion. Not that it would be in my top 10, but this is one of those times where, we talked about perfect games on a previous episode. What are the standards for perfection? This is a confidently made game that anyone can enjoy, and it's just fun. What else do you need for perfection than just pure fun, honestly?
So, Tom.
Yes.
Do you think this game needed to be remade?
I guess, it goes back to my argument about its availability. If they were not going to make the original available, for you to experience, and this is the only way that you can get it, at least this remake is bundling two games together and bringing you online multiplayer. So I think in this case, sure, there's a case for it to have been remade, as long as the remake doesn't suck. I'm for
that
it.
was my follow-up question. Do you think it's in good hands with Vicarious Visions?
I really hope. I think everybody involved with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5, which was a kind of notorious belly flop for the franchise that left a bad taste in the mouths of fans and even those behind the scenes. I would like to think that, given what we saw in the documentary, Tony is a very sincere guy who doesn't want these to be bad. I would hope that sincerity led to him, guiding Vicarious Visions to really knock this out of the park. So I'm really keeping my fingers crossed on this one. How about you, Josh? Do you think it needed to be remade?
I don't think it did. Okay. We already got two somewhat remakes before. We had Tony Hawk 2X, and then we had Tony Hawk Pro Skater HD for the Xbox 360, which I still have on my Xbox 360. It's not terrible. I don't think it needs to be remade, but I'm going to welcome it with open arms. I have the special collector's edition pre-ordered, so I get my awesome Tony Hawk Pro Skater skateboard that I've always wanted since I was young and could skateboard. But yeah, I'm going to be welcoming it. Vicarious Visions did an amazing job with the Crash Bandicoot trilogy. They did an amazing job with the Spyro trilogy. 3 for 3 with me right now. Come on. And everything that I've read or everything that I've watched on this game and the demos, I am not playing the warehouse demo that's out right now because I'm like, I want to experience it day one the way it is. And you guys will probably be able to see it here day one on twitch.tv/cast to the past. Everyone says this game just feels right. It feels exactly how it's supposed to. And that's all I needed to know.
So are we saying definitively that Vicarious Visions may be the best company to remaster games that have kind of significant presence on the PlayStation? You know what I mean?
I wouldn't go that far because Blue Point does a really good job at remakes as well.
Okay. All right. So we got two contenders.
So Blue Point might be the only other people that I would put trust in when it comes to remaking games. So Blue Point did, of course, the Shadow of the Colossus remake. They did the Uncharted collection on the PS4 as well. They did Gravity Rush. They did Flower when it came out to next gen consoles. They did the Metal Gear Solid HD collection. So like they have their hands on a lot of franchises that make things better. But Vicarious Vision's really good at revamping an entire franchise from the ground up. So as of right now, they're doing really good, and I hope that they continue on this awesome trend.
I do too. You know, game preservation. It's not an exact art yet. You know, gaming as a form of media is still relatively early compared to like music and film. So I would like to hope that like companies like this rise up and set a standard for preservation if this is how we're going to get it. So overall, definitely play the game however you can. We're looking forward to the remake. We would definitely love to hear what you think of it when it does come out. We encourage you to check out any upcoming Tony Hawk content we may have on as Josh said, twitch.tv/cast of the past. But you know, Josh, let's take a bite out of this documentary because this was a good watch in my opinion. How about you?
Yep. So from here on out, we're going to be diving into the Pretending I'm a Superman documentary. So if you wish to just hear about the video game, we are going to stop there, though we might have some back and forth here that's going to bring the games also into this. So
it'll be very spoilery, but you know, it's history. So I mean, you can get spoiled on Wikipedia, honestly. But,
that's true. You know. That's true. I mean, it is a documentary. Like, spoiler alert: the Titanic sank.
Spoiler alert: the Tony Hawk franchise was a great success, and Tony Hawk has been living a good life. Oh,
since the year 1999. Like, oh,
I know.
Who does he think he is? But yeah, so Tom, overall, what'd you think of the documentary?
It was very interesting, very well told. I thought the interviews fleshed out these, you know, important figures in skating history to an interesting degree. And, you know, it was just a wholesome, fine watch. What about you, Josh?
Yeah, it was good. It was. I've seen 2 or 3 documentaries about the Tony Hawk history of the games. And this was up there. This is pretty good. And one thing I really did like is that it dove a little bit more into, it had a lot of archived footage of the releases of all the games. So like when they had the really awkward interviews, we're standing here at this Tony Hawk high score thing. It's like, oh man, this is rough. But the
early 2000s is such a cringy time in retrospect. Like, I don't know how much Gen X people look back at their childhoods and cringe, but Josh, I gotta tell you, like, I guess I'm a mid-range millennial, and when I look back at the culture that I grew up in, it's just so like, ugh. Like,
didn't it feel like we just lived in a No Doubt music video the whole time?
Yeah. what Josh just referenced was the female host of a Tony Hawk competitive contest. And they called it like, you know, the high score contest. Like she was putting a lot of sexual emphasis on like, oh, these gamers are gonna score, you know, because that's the crap they did back then. Because, you know, as far as the media was concerned, all gamers were just like, you know, horny teenage boys. And they've got their demo out there, but it's just like, in retrospect, it was so like embarrassing.
It
I
was
guess.
cringy. Yeah,
And
it's cringy.
yeah. But I liked the kind of flashbacks to before they even get into the games. You kind of get a mini history about how skating as a subculture evolved through the 70s and 80s, and how fans of skateboarding or aspiring skateboarders, were able to do what they love to do. What did you think about those segments?
Yeah, it was cool. It was a lot of the like Lords of Dogtown kind of history of how skateboarding became how big it was, and that it died off in the 80s. But there was just that small group of guys that still were in it. Like Tony was saying, he was losing his sponsorship. He was losing like half of his pay every week, every month. Like it was getting rougher and rougher for him out there. And they were doing everything in their power to kind of revamp and revitalize what skateboarding was. And yeah, you look at stuff in the 70s and 80s and it's like, oh, they're just kind of skating around here a little bit. They're not really doing anything crazy. And you realize like, that's not what skateboarding was. Like you realize that's what skateboarding was back in the day. Like it wasn't until the mid 90s where you started doing the kick flips, the heel flips, the impossibles, the pop shove-its, all those, historical moves now. Like you had some people who were really good on street skating, but like it was really vert that took over and popularized all that kind of stuff. And then, I mean, Tony was the king of it even back then. Like you had the Dogtown Boys, but like Tony was there almost since day one, trying to make a living off of this. And then they tried to bring it in with the X Games. And then, there was some games here and there that, showcased skateboarding, but didn't really give you the same feel or the same idea of what skateboarding actually meant to those people who did it. It was more just like, hey, you're on a board, jump.
Yeah, Skate or Die and California Games, it's just like hit A and you will hop, things like that. It wasn't A, an authentic kind of look at the culture, or B, something that allowed you to get kind of complex and intricate the way that the Tony Hawk franchise gave when it debuted. Back to your notes real quick about how when skateboarding kind of fell out of the mainstream popularity in the 80s, there was a lot of talk about how those who were passionate about it, they kept it going themselves by like trading tapes of tricks and stuff and going to any events they could. It really reminded me of like wrestling fandom when you're really into like, underground wrestling federations, especially like in the 90s. You always hear stories about like ECW got more notoriety because fans would trade tapes of ECW shows and things like that.
Yeah.
So I think it's really interesting how video becoming accessible through camcorders and stuff in the 80s and 90s kept these fandoms alive in the way that like, now anybody who has digital technology like we do can like talk about their passion with the digital technology like cameras and things. It shows that like passionate people will always find a way to keep what they love alive, and that's something I really love, because you can tell everybody in this, Tony is super sincere, Bob Burnquist, Chad Muska, Steven Cabarello, they all just talk really frankly about how like they've loved this their whole life, and even just being adjacently attached to this game they think is like so special for them because they realize the impact they've had on the world and inspiring like a new generation of skaters.
Yeah, and it's awesome. And it, from there, it goes into the history of Tony trying to make a game or trying to get that idea of what a skateboarding game would be. And how I think he started with EA, if I'm not mistaken. Were they the first ones?
Actually, I think the earliest one that he mentioned, and this is hilarious, was he
spoke to Nintendo. I thought Nintendo was the second one, but
okay, I truly don't remember who the first one is, but he did speak to Nintendo, and they said no, and it kind of made me laugh because it reminded me about how Nintendo almost got the Harry Potter rights, and then they didn't get it. It's like, how many things did Nintendo miss on?
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, and it's even like Nintendo said no, right? Though the game ended up on Nintendo consoles.
Yep.
And still did amazing. Like, using the N64 controller sucked for that game. I know growing up, I played 2 a lot on PC. I played 1 on the PlayStation 1, 2 on the PC a little bit, but mostly on the Dreamcast. And then, I mean, PlayStation and Xbox after that for all the other ones. But like, it's so crazy that, you know, he shopped around so much, and then, you know, Activision came knocking and they were like, let's see what we can do. And man, you talk about just the planets aligning perfectly.
Absolutely. I think what was also interesting, so a little bit of a knock against the documentary is there's not a lot of like conflict. And I just mean that, like, you know, Tony was a hardworking guy who put his all into everything he did, and he found success in the field that he loved, and he lived a good life. He's not that he's dead, but you know, there's never anything where it's like, but then, you know, the scandal happened, or then you know, the company closed. It's just like things went good. The biggest quote unquote problems that the documentary gets into are, they do talk about how Tony Hawk's Underground, which we reviewed and you can listen to on your favorite podcast apps. They kind of mention how that was like a plateau for the series, you know, like it was like 1, 2, 3, 4 thug. And then it was just kind of like, it stopped going up. It started like, you know, peaking and troughing. And then from there, they were still quote unquote successful, but they never reached the same heights.
Right.
And then of course he talks about Tony Hawk Ride, which is where you had the skateboard motion peripheral. And he just flat out says, it didn't work like it was supposed to. We did this too early. By the time the technology actually got good, people had kind of turned on the idea. So that's arguably the biggest failure in the story, is just talking about how Ride was a botch, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it sucks because I heard Shred was actually really good with like the peripheral that came with Shred, but it's by the time you got to it, it had such a bitter taste in everyone's mouth. And like, okay, well, we had Project 8. Project 8 didn't do good. We had American Wasteland. That didn't really do good either. Then we had the two there, the Ride and Shred. They didn't sell that great. Then you had 5 come out, and they didn't even touch base on 5 at all.
Yeah, I think it's because
everyone knows. Everyone knows. Like, it was just a cluster. But with that documentary, yeah, I mean, there wasn't that much conflict, but I don't think there needs to always be conflict with it. Like, this is just a good, wholesome story of people working together to make something that everyone's going to enjoy, and it actually works. Like, it worked in their favor. Like, hey, we want to make a game that everyone enjoys, and son of a bitch, everyone enjoyed it. Like, why does there need to be conflict?
No, I get you. Sometimes the positive story is just something everyone needs. You know, there's so much doom and gloom in the world that just hearing, hey, here's a bunch of people who cared a lot and everything worked out. That's great to hear. It's not. I'm not saying this is like a piece of crap because there's no conflict in it. It's just like, you know, with stories like these, you know, you do expect to hear something, but it's just like, no, everything worked out fine. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, there is one documentary that I did watch where Tony was saying, I think it was like right after 3 came out or right before 3 was coming out or something like that, where he was talking to like the marketing team or something like that for Activision, and they sat down with him. Like, they're like, hey, can we go to dinner or to lunch or something like that? And they come out and they're sitting down and talking with him and like, hey, just want to let you know, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 just went greatest hits, and 2 is really close to becoming a greatest hits thing too. So we wanted to just thank you for allowing us to use your name and do this. And they gave him a check for like $2 million. Like just like, hey, thanks. We know that you could have gotten more money from this, but like we're here. And they just handed him the check. And I was like, that's awesome. Like, that just shows how good Activision was to him at the same time too, that he was to them.
Activision.
And during the documentary though, like, he talks about like they tried to do a buyout on his name.
They did.
And
they were going to pay
him
$500. They were going to pay him $500,000 as just like a complete royalty buyout. Like, this, we'll give you this lump sum, and then we will never have to give you any money for the use of your name ever again. And I bet he mentions in the documentary, he's like, best move I ever made.
Yeah,
you know,
it was.
So, documentary, would you recommend, Josh?
Yeah, I paid $6 to rent it. I think it was like $8 to buy it. Just buy it if you really are interested in the Tony Hawk lore and stuff. I have a feeling this is probably going to hit on streaming services soon, though. So it really depends on how much you want to dive into this. We've only touched base on a little bit of it here. The documentary is like an hour and 15 minutes long. So like,
Yeah,
definitely like show support to the people who made it. It's pretty well made, and it dives into the history on the music too inside of it, which we didn't even talk about, where it's interviews with Bad Religion, with Primus, with Goldfinger as well, just showing what this game did for them. Like, so yeah, if you want to give some love to the documentaries. If you want to give love to some of the documentarians that made this, definitely give them your $6 to rent it or $8 to buy it. Like it's worth your watch. What about you, Tom?
yeah. Along the same lines, given that we're in the middle of an economic collapse and a worldwide pandemic, filmmakers need to be supported.
Right.
Literally, if they're not making movies, because they're not working, they're not making money. So throw some money at least to the crew who made this. I would say I would have preferred to have seen this on a streaming service. I don't mind that I paid for it, but it's good. It's good. It's a heartwarming, just like, story, like I said, of positive things happening. And if you're a big fan, I can't see why you wouldn't have already, gotten this. So it's definitely worth a watch. Depending, I'm splitting this ridiculous line between support creative people, but save money if you need to. So it's good though. Just
now
check it out at your own discretion.
Would you have preferred this to be in the special features of the re-release of the game?
I think it would have been really cool, honestly, if it was, because I love that special feature.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Let us know what you think. If you've actually played the Tony Hawk demo, if you've watched the documentary, let us know what you think of all of it. I mean, Tony Hawk is an awesome franchise. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 is an awesome game. We've had so much fun with it in the years, 20 years still going strong. And, hopefully in the next couple days here, once the 1+2 remake comes out, we're all going to relive the year 2000 all over again.
Hopefully, because I cannot take 2020 anymore.
But until next time, this has been Josh.
And Tom.
And we'll see you in the future. Well, that's all the time that we can spend in the past, so thanks for listening. Subscribe to A Cast of the Past on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. And stay up to date with The Cast of the Past by making sure you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. There you can be the first to know when new episodes drop, as well as joining in on discussions on all things gaming. And until next time, we'll see you in the future.